Hello, my name is Jim Jensen. Thank you for watching. The title of this video is The Basics of an English Presentation. I assume you would like some information on giving a presentation in English. Would you like some tips on communicating with your audience? Would you like some information on how to organize your presentation? Would you like some advice about visual aids? That's what I will do in this video. First, I will talk about communicating with your audience. Then I will talk about the structure. And then I will give some tips on visual aids. Finally, I will give an example presentation in English. So let's begin. The most important thing in any presentation is your voice. You want to speak loudly and clearly. Be confident. Don't worry so much about gestures. Just be confident. The pace is important. You don't want to be too slow or too fast. An appropriate pace is about 150 words per minute. Vocabulary is important. You have to know your audience, know what your audience can understand, and know what your audience might expect. You don't have to use big words. Keep it simple. Avoid slang and jargon unless it's appropriate to your audience. The important thing is to know your audience. Also, very important is eye contact. You want to maintain a connection with your audience. Don't read. Know what you want to say so that you don't have to read. Have notes, a plan. Don't be afraid to refer to your plan, but don't read. Practice with your notes. Write your notes large enough so that you can find the information at a glance. Maintain eye contact. Speak loudly and clearly at about 150 words per minute. Keep your vocabulary and the grammar simple. Essentially, you have to keep your audience in mind. So let's move on to how you organize your presentation. The structure of an English presentation is very much like the structure of an English essay. There is an introduction, then the body, and a conclusion. Each of these main parts is connected with transitions. Transitions are very important. They're signs that let your audience know something new is coming. Each of the main parts should be separated with a transition. The introduction, like the introduction to this video, starts with a greeting where you give your name, you thank the audience, and you give the title. And then there's an attention grabber. You do something to get the interest of your audience. There's many ways to do this. You could ask questions, you could tell a story, you could just give facts. For example, if you're talking about staying safe in a lightning storm, you could ask questions. Do you know how often lightning strikes? Do you know how many people are injured in lightning strikes? Do you want to know how to stay safe? Or you could tell a story. I was walking through the park and lightning struck a tree. I didn't know what to do. In this video, I will tell you. You could just state some interesting facts. Lightning strikes every 10 seconds. Thousands of people die every year. In this video, I will tell you how to be safe. So there's many ways to grab your audience's attention. Do it quickly, it's very short, and then give a preview of what you're going to say. So you introduce yourself, you grab the audience's attention, and then you give a preview. And then you transition to the body, which we'll do right now. The body of your presentation is the most important part. It's where you develop your argument. It's the most complex part. Essentially, it should be make a point, support your point, have a transition to the next point, support that point, transition to another point. Of course, it depends on how long your presentation is, how complex, and what you hope to accomplish. You have to organize the points to accomplish your goal. There are many ways to do this. There are some common patterns. One common pattern is to use time. If you want to discuss how some situation developed, you can use sequencing: first, second, third, next. Or you can talk historically. If you want to talk about the Olympics, you can talk about the history of the Olympics, you can talk about the Olympics today, and project to the future. So if you want to talk about how processes or situations evolved, developed, you use time. If you want to talk about human practices or culture, you can organize your presentation around different places. You can talk about marriage in Saudi Arabia and marriage in Japan and marriage in America. You can talk about different places, compare them and contrast them. Another common organizational pattern is cause and effect. You can talk about psychological depression. You can talk about what it is, and then how it affects different groups, workers, children, what have you. Or you can reverse it. You can talk about how depression affects children or workers or students, and then talk about the cause and potential remedies. Advantages and disadvantages, that's another way to organize your presentation. You can talk about what's good about something and about what's bad about it. You can compare. If you want to talk about joining a university club, for example, you can talk about the advantages of being in a club and compare them with the disadvantages. This is very persuasive. In my example presentation, I will organize my talk in a problem solution format. I will explain a problem, its cause, and then talk about the solution. It's another common way to organize a presentation. Basically, there are many ways to do this. It depends on what you want to do. Are you trying to persuade people? Are you trying to sell something? Are you asking for donations? Are you discussing research? You have to organize the body of your presentation according to what you hope to accomplish. Make a point, support it, transition to the next point. Make it very clear and logical. Finally, I'll talk about the conclusion to your presentation. The conclusion is obviously very important. It's also often the shortest part of a presentation. Usually, the conclusion includes a summary of what you said and then final thoughts. Often, conclusions end with memorable ideas, something that the audience can recall easily. Martin Luther King, in his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, ended with a quote from a spiritual: free at last, thank God, free at last. And that was a very memorable way to end this speech. It left the audience thinking and pondering the meaning of his speech. Summarize, make your final point, and leave the audience with something to think about. That's my suggestions for how you conclude your English presentation. Of course, often presentations are accompanied with visual aids. I'll give a few ideas about how to use visual aids next. Basically, there are two types of visual aids: high-tech and low-tech. Low-tech are graphs and diagrams and pictures that you print out and show. High-tech use software like PowerPoint and Keynote, and you project them onto a screen. I'll give some ideas for both, that fit both, that are appropriate for both. First, keep them simple. Don't have a lot of complicated ideas. Use one color or a few colors, one font. Try to keep things the same size. In my presentation, I will use this graph. I won't use the graph on the bottom. If it happens to be appropriate to the audience, I might, but in general, keep it very simple. Also, don't have a lot of text. In my presentation, my example presentation, I will use this picture. I won't use the bottom picture. There's too much text. If there's a lot of text on your visual aid, the audience has to decide between reading and listening to you. It's best to show something very simple and explain it to the audience so that they don't have to read. Also, you don't have to use a lot of visual aids. Steve Jobs, when he wrote about giving presentations, said to keep them at a minimum. Maybe one or two for each of your main points. Keep them simple. You don't need a lot of them. And finally, refer to them, point to them, discuss them. But don't turn your back on your audience, and keep referring back to connect with your audience. Keep your eye contact with your audience. Don't focus all your attention on the slide. Maintain contact. Simple slides, not too much text. Keep it simple. That's my advice. Now I will give a short presentation demonstrating what I have been talking about. Hello, my name is Jim Jensen. Thank you for watching. The title of this presentation is "The Hole in the Ozone Layer." Good news? I suppose you have heard about the problem with the ozone layer. But do you know it's not a hole? And do you know the good news? Well, that's what this presentation is going to be about. I will explain the problem with the ozone. I will talk about the cause and the solution. So let's get started. The ozone layer, as you can see, is part of the atmosphere, and it's 25 kilometers from the surface of the Earth. It's not very thick, but it's important because it blocks ultraviolet light, UV light, and protects the Earth from getting too much UV light. UV is harmful to plants and animals, and it causes skin cancer in humans. In the 1970s, it was discovered that there are areas where the ozone layer is thinning. It's not a hole, it's a thinning, it's depletion. The ozone layer is being depleted, and obviously that's a problem because that will allow more UV light to reach Earth. And there was an increase in skin cancer, cases of skin cancer related to this problem. The problem was greatest in the 1980s and 90s. The cause? Well, it turns out the cause of the depletion of the ozone layer are chemicals called chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs. These are man-made chemicals used in aerosol spray cans and refrigeration, among other things. And what happens is when these chemicals are released into the atmosphere, they float up to the ozone layer and migrate to where it's coldest. So the depletion of the ozone layer is greatest in the polar regions where it's coldest. Well, these chemicals float up, migrate to cold areas, and then react with ozone molecules, breaking them up, causing the ozone layer to become thinner. The solution? Well, since these chemicals are man-made, the solution is to stop making them. And in fact, that happened. Most industrialized countries have banned the production of CFCs, and the results are the good news. This chart shows how, since CFCs have been banned, since the production of CFCs have been banned, the ozone layer is repairing itself. Of course, we do not know how many tons of CFCs are locked away in dumps or landfills, so we don't know what will happen if and when they are released into the atmosphere. But we do know that since CFCs have been banned, the ozone layer is repairing itself. So in conclusion, I just want to say that since we get very little good news about Earth's environment these days, the fact that banning CFCs has led to the ozone layer repairing itself is good news that we should be very happy about. Thank you for watching. This is the outline for the hole in the ozone layer presentation. Notice the three main parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. Notice the transitions between them and the transitions between each part of the body. Some things to remember. When you prepare your presentation, keep your audience in mind. Think of what you hope to accomplish and organize things accordingly. And practice. Practice with your notes so you don't have to read. And practice so that any information you might need, you can find easily. Finally, keep it simple. Keep your vocabulary simple. Keep your visual aids simple. Also, in a live presentation, you would be expected to invite questions from the audience. You can do that simply with a question. Are there any questions? Or you can make a statement. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And once someone does ask a question, you should acknowledge it before answering. You could say, that's a good question, or you could just thank them for the question. Thank you for asking that. Finally, I want to thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful.